Shalom and welcome, all my brothers and sisters worldwide. Today, very briefly, I'm going to give several examples as to the problems that Jews have had. Some of the problems. There's many problems, but specifically with the claims of the resurrection of Jesus or Yeshua in the Gospels. This is a very basic explanation as to basically describing from the Gospels themselves the internal problems with the claims of the resurrection, even according to the Greek books of the Christian Bible. Why are they problematic? Because they in themselves cannot get their central story correct. So let's begin. Many Christians in general, Messianics, whoever the case, when they know that basically the Jewish standpoint is that the reason why, the bottom line, why we don't accept Jesus or Yeshua as the Messiah is very simple. He fulfilled none of the Messianic prophecies outlined clearly and consistently in Tanakh. Now, many people will have disagreements and say, well, he was supposed to fulfill all these other passages, which they throw, 100, 200, 300. And we just basically say, you know what, all those passages that you claim are Messianic fulfillments, when you look at them very carefully, they basically, there's nothing really there. They disappear like cotton candy, in general. So what they'll go to is, the next point will go to the miracles. Well, Jesus must be the Messiah because he fulfilled miracles. Again, the Hebrew Scriptures never, ever tells us that we will know who the Messiah is based on the miracles he will do. It's just nowhere to be found. In fact, the opposite can be argued the case. For example, very clearly, in Deuteronomy chapter 13, verses 1 through 4, God says himself that he will send false apostles or false prophets who will do miracles. And he'll do this for what reason? Basically says to test our loyalty, whether we love God, Elohim, or this miracle worker or dreamer of dreams, prophet. It's a test. Even the Christian scriptures describes in Matthew chapter 24 verses 24 that even false messiahs can perform miracles. So even according to the Christian Bible, miracles do not specifically prove that someone is or is not the Messiah. That being said, the focus of this presentation, brief presentation, is on the alleged resurrection of Jesus or Yeshua. What I'm going to show is the inconsistencies in the Gospels themselves in claiming that Jesus was resurrected from the dead. Now, the self-appointed Apostle Paul says that if Jesus didn't get resurrected, there's no point to your faith. There's nothing to our faith. It's in vain. It's worthless. So the bottom line is, almost all the chips are rounded up on the resurrection. The credibility of the resurrection. It's of great importance. That being said, we got to look at the problems. How consistent are the Gospels, the actual books, the Greek Testament, on claiming that there was an alleged resurrection? Do they have the same story? The answer is no. For example, let's just look at a few examples. Who first approached the empty tomb? Who first approached the tomb? It depends on which gospel you read. For example, Matthew 28 verse 1 says Mary Magdalene and another Mary approached the tomb. In Mark chapter 16 verse 1 says Mary Magdalene, another Mary, and Salome came to the tomb. In Luke chapter 24 verse 10, Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, Joanna, and other women approached the tomb. In John chapter 20 verse 1, it's just Mary Magdalene alone. Who did they first see at the tomb? Again, it depends on which gospel you read. In the Gospel of Matthew, it's one angel outside the tomb. In Mark, it's one man inside the tomb. In Luke, it's two men inside the tomb. In John, there's no one at all. In fact, the story is that she believes someone stole the body. which is a totally different case than all the other Gospels. John's completely different. Next, who first told Mary about the resurrection of Jesus? In Matthew, it's an angel. In Mark, it's a man. In Luke, it's two men. In John, it's Jesus himself. To whom did Jesus first appear? Again, depends on which gospel you read. In Matthew, it's to a joyous Mary on the road. In John, it's to a grief-stricken Mary in the tomb who thinks that somebody stole the body. It's a completely different story. What did the women do when hearing that Jesus had risen? Again, depends on which gospel. In Matthew and Luke, they rushed to tell the disciples. In Mark, actually the earliest manuscripts, Greek manuscripts of Mark, say they end with, and they did not tell anyone. They were told, and they didn't tell anyone. They were scared and frightened, so they ran away. They didn't tell anyone. Later on, later scribes in the later manuscripts put in extra passages to fill in the blanks because it was embarrassment to the church, obviously. Where did Jesus first reveal himself to his 11 disciples? Again, it depends. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 16 through 17, Matthew, it's in the Galilee. In Luke, it's Jerusalem. In John, it was only to 10 of his disciples. Note that none of the gospel writers were eyewitnesses. Luke, Matthew, Mark, John, the books never end with "Sincerely yours, Luke." Never. This is not the case. The authors of these books are anonymous. And any scholar will tell you this. None of them have the description of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. These were put there by tradition from the Catholic Church tradition. I'm not making this up. You can look this up in any Christian scholarly source. They will tell you the same thing. Another problem, many of the followers of Jesus didn't even recognize him after the resurrection stories of the Gospels. Many doubted that anything even happened. Where do you find this? Matthew chapter 28, verse 17. Mark chapter 16, verse 11 and verse 13. Luke chapter 24, verse 16. John chapter 20, verse 14. And John chapter 21, verse 4. Another point. Jesus allegedly told the rabbis, yes, the Pharisees, all of them, in their face, they were asking for a sign. And he says in Mark, you're not going to get a sign at all, period. In the book of Matthew, the later gospel, they put something else in his mouth, and he says, you're not going to get a sign, except one sign, the sign of Jonah. When he was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so too will the Son of Man be in the ground and be raised on the 3rd day. Well, there's a problem with that. After his alleged resurrection, he never went back to the Sanhedrin in front of the rabbis and said, hello, I'm back. I'm here again. See, I told you. He never showed up. This would have been an amazing proof if he would have showed up in front of the Sanhedrin. But no, he only conveniently appears to the people that already believed in him. The fact that Christians have sacrificed their lives for their belief in the resurrection doesn't prove that it happened. Okay? Doesn't prove it. Virtually all religions have martyrs willing to die for what they believe is true. And you find that throughout religious. It does not make it true. Aside from the alleged resurrection of Jesus hanging exclusively on these weak passages throughout the Gospels, and the New Testament's colluded attempts and accounts, a resurrection wouldn't prove that he's the Messiah anyways. Because, again, the Tanakh does not support a resurrection of a dying Messiah. It doesn't support it. In Isaiah 53, I'm sorry, if Isaiah 53 is your only one-up, it's not. That's a whole other subject in itself. But there's so many problems, internal problems, with the Gospels and the resurrection story. So if the Gospels cannot even get their story correct, How are we as Jews ever supposed to take these claims seriously when the storytellers cannot even get their stories correct? Shalom, and hope that you'll subscribe.